intergenerational basis and also work with older adults. So I went on to do my PhD at Arizona State University in theater for young audiences with a specialty in intergenerational drama. Excuse me. And then went on partnership with the Ministry of Education looking at intergenerational connections, and taught at the Northwest School in Seattle for about 7 years and incorporated intergenerational programs as much as I could in my middle and high school classes that I taught at the school. And then left the Northwest School in 2013, first to go to Ethiopia to help open a new high school, and then do some consulting on nutrition education through the arts, and started Silver Kite and launched Silver Kite in the fall of 2014, and have been doing this work ever since. So there's a little bit.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. You have a stunning background. We actually intersect in a lot of ways with our background, Jen. Love that you use the word magic and magical. And theater is really just one of those art forms where you can create magic for the audiences. And I know you said a little bit about how you got started with intergenerational arts work. Is there more that you'd like to share with us about that work for you?
Yes. Yeah. So the first sort of intergenerational moment came in that I was sort of part of, I guess, came in a 5th and 6th grade classroom, an elementary school, and the students were engaged in a 4-month-long art-integrated curriculum that was focused on a simultaneous learning of skills in drama as well as learning about immigration. And this was in, 1999. And so a colleague suggested that I bring or invite members of the community to come in and talk to the students about their immigration experience. And so they did, and I helped the students prepare for that moment of meeting and interviewing. And then not only was it magical where the folks from the community were talking to the students and engaging in these really interesting conversations, but after that experience, the students said that this was one of the most valuable parts of the curriculum that we had developed. And as their final assessment of student learning for the curriculum, the students had to create a theater performance based on what they had learned. And the students suggested that they perform the stories that they had learned from the community members when they came to the classroom. So they had suggested that. I thought it was a cool idea, and I worked with them to try to figure out how we could perform these stories in a way that would be honoring of the people who had shared the stories and experienced them with us. And then we had invited the folks who had come to the class for the oral history interviews to our final performance. And there was one gentleman who at that time was 84 years old, and I had known him for several years, and he was a gentleman from Hungary. And he came with his wife, and the students had performed their story as part of this play that they had created. And the play was called Immigrant Times. It was very cool. So this gentleman named Paul came up to me afterwards, and he had always been very sort of strict in his demeanor and kind of stoic. And after the performance, he came up to me and he grabbed my hands and he was crying. And he said, "This performance has given my life new meaning." And so it was seeing how deeply he felt about having his story shared that was really quite moving and quite inspiring to me.
So when you say he was crying, clearly what you and your students created had a huge impact on this gentleman. Did he tell you any more about that impact, Jen?
He didn't, but his wife did. So after the performance, Paul passed away about 3 or 4 months later, and I called his wife just to express my condolences after he had passed, and she told me that he had talked about the performance quite a lot, and how tickled he was that his story had been heard and that the students had chosen to share it and that they had done such a great job reliving that moment. So it had continued to have an impact on him for several months after the performance. It was quite an honor.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. No matter where you are on the planet, it seems like every person has a basic need to be heard, seen, and loved, and that sense of his story seemed, it's just, you use the word magic, I'm going to say magical for him. And what a to be able to have that kind of offering for not only Paul, but for other people.
Yes, and it was also a hugely magical and inspiring performance for the young people as well, since it was the first time I had played around with this idea of performing personal stories on stage. That particular Immigrant Times show was the first one. I didn't really know what would happen. So I think most of my life I'm kind of an experimenter in trying out new things and seeing how they kind of impact or can help people. And so the students were deeply moved by the hugs and the comments that they had been given by the community members who had come to see the performance as well. They were really moved. And about I'd say maybe 8 or 9 years ago, so this was about 10 years after we had done the performance, I was at a community gathering, and this young woman who I did not recognize came up to me and said, "I just want to thank you because I was in that show." And these 10 years later, she was still thinking about it. So that was quite amazing to me as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I was just going to ask you that oftentimes we don't really even know in the moment what impact we have, and that ripple effect just continues in somebody's life. And how wonderful for you to encounter this student who had been part of that production.
Yeah. I think, the arts in terms of its presence in educational institutions on a regular basis is challenging to assess, because I think you're right in that it often is kind of a slow growth to impact. So it's either, like in my experience, having participated in a number of years and then sort of realizing the gifts that the art form of theater had given me, particularly in a difficult time in my life. But also, oftentimes the experience of participating in a piece of theater or creating a piece of visual art and the learnings and the personal growth that happens beneath and around the creation of that, I think perhaps comes to light a little bit later. So it's often hard to sort of measure the impact immediately after a particular program or an event happens.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. So can you share with us, Jen, you've been kind of steeped in the arts and in terms of your education, your experience. Can you share with our listeners why participating in the arts is so valuable?
Well, as I mentioned, it really has had a deep impact on me and really helped me to heal from a very difficult time in my life. And now, as I've been kind of diving into the research around the importance of the arts, I think, there are a couple of new-ish studies that have come to the fore, and particularly talking about how the impact of participating in the arts can have in terms of helping with stress release. So in particular, there was a study that came out of Drexel University in the last 2 years or so that talked about how participation in the arts, even if you do not perceive yourself as being fantastic at that particular art form, if you're not, the next Leonardo da Vinci or whatnot, the fact that you are participating in it can help decrease your stress level. So I think that is a huge thing. And I think participating in the arts also gives you a structure and invites you and gives you permission to play. And play is such an important part of the lifespan, at any point in your lifespan, to engage in experimentation, in play, by trying something new, by experimenting with, different colors of marker or paint. All of that is play. And participating in play helps you to see new things or see things in a new perspective. And also, it helps you to invite new possibilities in the way that you can live your life. It allows you to kind of open your box or open your frame of reference a little bit to look around you and find new ways of engaging in the world. So I would say those are sort of two huge things that I think participating in the arts helps everyone. And depending on whatever art form that you're engaged in, it also has benefits in other ways as well. For example, participating in the theater can help boost communication skills, self-confidence, self-esteem, all of those wonderful things that can boost your mood and eliminate loneliness and isolationism. I think that that's really important. And I think also, I could go on this tangent for like 45 hours. Also, particularly participating in the arts for older adults who are experiencing perhaps cognitive or physical challenges as they're aging, participating in the arts opens up new ways of communicating where verbal communication might be a struggle for someone, I guess, in any stage of life. Creating a nonverbal sense of communication or a way to express an idea is really valuable to get your ideas out, to suggest something to somebody else, to communicate your feelings about a particular thing. So all of those things are wonderful benefits of participating in the arts.
Yeah, I can tell you could talk about this for hours. So much to say, really, and I think you've hit on, the developmental arc of our lives, that the arts can really be helpful to us in any stage of life, whether we're young or whether we're an elder or anywhere in between.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so would you recommend, Jen, for people who may be shy about getting involved in the arts, would you recommend them getting involved if they've never tried it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many different ways to get involved in the arts also, and things that I would recommend if somebody has not participated in the arts before to try sort of a one-off workshop as sort of a taster to sort of see how you feel about it before maybe committing to, a 6-8 week class. And a lot of public library systems offer one-off arts workshops that are free and available for people to experiment and try things. And if that doesn't appeal or if it's not accessible for whatever reason, there are a lot of online organizations that offer arts workshops or arts classes to try. In addition to that, you can also sort of, pick up a book at your local library or bookstore and try something out. For example, I never knitted before in my life, and I just decided, and no one in my family is a knitter, and so I decided I wanted to learn, and I got a book from the library, and I taught myself how to knit, which I found to be really therapeutic and quite fun at this point in my life. So that's my sort of new art form is knitting. So all of those things are ways to sort of get involved and give it a try. And I think, each person may find a different art form more appealing than something else, for example. So I think sort of getting involved in the arts may take a little bit of experimentation and play to find out what it is that you really want to try and get involved with. So those are some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And I know you gave us a number of suggestions in terms of how to get started, maybe going to the library, going online, getting a book. Are there other ways that you would recommend, if somebody's really shy? I encounter a lot of times in my work with leaders, I teach creative leadership and other forms of leadership, and they'll say, somebody else is creative, but not me. So they're shy or they don't self-identify as creative. So are there other suggestions that you might have, Jen, in terms of helping somebody get started who says, oh, no, I could never do that?